Welcome to Unlimit Your Potential, the podcast where high performers, leaders, and everyday warriors come to break through limits and rise into who they're meant to be. I'm your host, Seth Pepper, high performance coach, mindset strategist, and lifelong student of human potential. We don't just talk about motivation. We build mastery, we sharpen discipline, we develop the mindset required to win consistently. Each episode, I'll bring you powerful conversations, proven framework, and real-world strategies to help you elevate your performance, strengthen your resilience, and live with purpose. If you're ready to stop settling, start growing, and truly unlimit what's possible in your life, this is your home.
Ranked number 1 in the world, World Championship medalist, Pan-Pacific gold medalist, 2-time NCAA champion, 2-time U.S. Open record holder, 23-time All-American, fastest split ever recorded. Seth Pepper didn't read about elite performance in a book. He earned it in the water against the fastest humans on the planet. His coaching career consists of pulling the playbook out of Olympians, champions, professional athletes, and coaches. This week, the chair turns around. No guest, no script, just Seth. His story, his why, and the mindset that takes you from where you are to where you're built to be. Unlimit Your Potential starts here.
I want to thank everyone out there that is going to go on this journey with us. And you are part of this. The audience draws out what is necessary. This is an organic relationship that we have. And so when you follow us, it's going to be something. I know there's so much noise out there. You can fill your day with all kinds of information, all kinds of stories. And for you to stay dedicated to this space and to be able to just lock in with us, allow this sort of container that we're going to have, bubble, if you will. That's a performance environment. I know that you're going to get a lot out of this. So your commitment, it's always the macro, micro of, are you committed to the shot? Are you committed to the next action? Are you committed to the moment? So your commitment is everything. And I know that you're going to get so much from this, on a regular basis. It's going to blow my mind before it blows your mind. Or maybe it'll happen together. But I really believe that this is going to be a special journey. And I think this is the right time for this because there is so much noise. There are so many choices. Your phone is actually designed to distract you from doing things. And I say that in a loving sort of way. Your phone is an amazing tool. I think it's incredible. But in these sort of platforms, there can be a lot of noise, a lot of distraction, another sort of silver bullet. We are not giving silver bullets here. This is not a get rich quick or get the solution quick. It's not even get the solution long. It's just get the thing going now and keep moving forward together. And we're going to move together on this. So I really appreciate that you're going to spend your time with us and trust us that, we can get something in this experience together. And this comes from a love. Again, the obsession. Kobe said, the greats, what they have in common is they love what they do. It's not about the trophies. It's not about the money. It's not about the fame. It's about loving what you do. And a key phrase to that is he says, we study what we love. Now think about that. All of us, every human being, we study what we love. So if you love getting better, we're going to study this thing together. Unlimit your potential is a phrase that it popped into my head. So I've always been open to like, there's something beyond, you know, you can call it what you want. God, spirit, energy, ancestors, you name it. Subconscious mind. But it popped into my head. I was about 6 years old. And unlimit your potential. It's a misspelling, actually, unlimit, you know. So I see that every time. So I was like, whoa, it's a very unique thing, and I stuck with it. And it's just the way I've lived my life with this level of curiosity where I didn't do well in school. I'm not saying that that's something that I'm proud of. It's just what happened with me. In school for me was a curiosity as well. I'm a learner, but I don't want to learn that. And why does regurgitating that information, how is that going to help me? So I was a bit rebellious in that sense. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because there are certain professions where that works well and that is necessary. But I was curious, how could I speed up my learning, my ability to perform as a human being in the human condition? That's what I was trying. So, you know, I'd get into these books because my dad is always into like self-help. So I grew up with all these books of speed reading and photographic memory and, you know, training the mind and, you know, just stuff that you just didn't hear about. And then I'd see people that could just be so creative and inventive and could do daring things. My brother is a great example of that, where he just creates all the time and he doesn't really experience fear. And I would see all these differences, and then we just didn't fit in. So I was always interested, like, if you could remove all the resistance and you could give someone the ability to be able to unlimit their potential, just imagine how powerful that is. Because so much of the system seems to not necessarily focus on how do we unlimit this thing? What is our real objective? Do we just want these people to be controllable, fit in? Or do we actually want to be able to harness the energy within the individual and then be able to maximize it? So that's my unlimit your potential. It's a true sort of curiosity that never stops because I'm fascinated. And then it brings in kind of like the faith element, because in order for you to be, let's say, unlimited, it happens like in performance tech talk would be the flow state, the zone, the moment, being present. The simple of it is you're going to be in your body, like children are in the flow state all the time. They're being present all the time because they're just experiencing life and they keep moving through life. They're not judging life. They're not judging themselves of winning and losing. They're just doing things. They're fully present. And that's when you're unlimited, is when, you know, so the simple equation that I use is your ultimate performance equals your ability minus resistance. It's simple. Resistance, though, is usually self-inflicted. It's you getting in your own way. So when people ask me, what do you do? The simple way that I describe it is I just help people get out of their own way. That's what we're doing. As human beings, we get in our own way. So I like to go back to the simple of that to try and understand through evolution, the human body, the mind. The mind is here to keep you safe for survival. So it's trying to assess the environment. And it's trying to go, are you going to be the hunter in this moment? Or are you going to be the hunted in this moment? And it's constantly going through these two extreme scenarios. And your mind is actually trying to guess what's going to happen next. And what's interesting is that we are usually wrong, if not always wrong. But we don't have another system to be able to compare and contrast or choose. So we're making these faulty sort of assessments all day long, And what I try to do, especially in the performance field, is to help people to realize your mind is trying, where does pressure come from? So organically, pressure happens in situations when you care about what's going to happen. That's performance. That's if you're going to give a speech. That's if you're going to ask someone out on a date. That's if you're going to do anything important in your life. It is going to have pressure. Learn to deal with it. Create a relationship with it. Where does pressure come from? So pressure is the anticipation inside your body. So your body starts to respond, oh my gosh, I'm going to go do this thing. And then what does your mind do? It does the only thing it can do, because it can't do anything other than try and guess. And all those guesses are usually wrong. Well, she could say yes, she could say no, right? I could go out there and I could win. Oh, I could lose. And it's going through these extremes. And then when you're not really aware of that, you can actually think that that's possibly going to happen. I'm going to go out there on stage and fall on my face. And then you fixate on that, even though your mind was just guessing, and that becomes your reality. So what I try to do is try to be curious about, okay, we have this feeling of pressure. We have this mechanical nature of our mind that's just trying to keep us safe. How do we navigate pressure so that we're going to allow the mind to just guess? But we're going to be aware that it's guessing, that it's not the truth, right? I like to say feelings are not facts. They're just feelings. They feel really real because they're your feelings. So how do we move around these things? How do we use the mechanical nature so that you can actually move around the situation rather than be kind of like a slave to the situation? So I like to say, you're either writing the story or the story's writing you. I'm sure someone else has said that. Which is really, in the reality that you're creating, are you able to navigate pressure to where you can be at your best under that opportunity, in that opportunity? And it's always going to be uncomfortable. So the better you get with pressure, the more opportunity you get in life. The bigger opportunities you get in life. And that's just a very simple thing. Entry-level job, everybody's doing these sort of like beginner jobs. Managers are watching you to see, how do you handle pressure? If you handle pressure well and you make great decisions under pressure, you're a managerial material. So it's the nature of everything, it seems like, in life, that the cream rises to the top. So how you handle those opportunities gives you more opportunities. So for me, it's been interesting just to understand like the basic nature of a human being, the human condition, and help us get out of our own way by seeing ourselves. For me, it's been a journey of just sharing and not really going to do something or be, like outwardly be something, because that was my younger version. Was trying to be successful, trying to get all those trappings, and then finally letting it go, going through my own sort of internal journey, get to the other side, living life, just simple life, father, husband, and then once someone had discovered this past identity, the athlete, that's when it all unfolded. But it just happened it seems like almost like happenstance, where someone saw my name on a record board at the university and they said, that's interesting, is that you? There's not a lot of Seth Peppers in the world, so yeah. And I said, yeah, that is me. So I started obviously telling the story and sharing it, and it was a fellow parent. And after they heard it, they'd say, hey, have you heard Seth's story, to another parent? And then they all wanted to hear this story. And then they really encouraged me to go out and share this story. And my wife, who's behind everything, she realized, she might have seen it even before then, that how can we do what they're talking about, which is go share this story. So I started, I'm used to being an athlete and having a coach, so I found a coach who could help me to kind of put in place a way to help people. And from there, it just kind of organically happened that the lowest hanging fruit was to help athletes, because I understood that world. And so I started working with athletes, and I was also on interviews, podcasts, shows, telling that story. And the story really included a lot of people without me even knowing. And the story involves a lot of sort of belief, faith, hard work, pain, failure. And the more I would share, not only the experience, but how I got through it, the tangibles of the tools, I just realized that I may look at the world differently than other people, where it's just, for me, it's always like the human condition. We're an animal on this planet. We have this body. How does it function? How can you help it to function even more? And then performance is about that when it, goes into the mental. And then beyond it, understanding the faith, the belief, the trust, the something that's intangibly tangible, if you will. And once I started sharing that, I think people could relate to the simplicity of it. It's super simple. Because if it's not simple, it doesn't stick with me. I'm just used to that, because I'm a person of habit, of routine. I really need to do something over and over and over, and it has to just become part of me. I've just always been like that. For a long time, I felt stupid because I didn't have a lot of complexity. I didn't hold on to a lot of facts and knowledge. But the things that did stick, stuck. And I realized later that the way that I looked at the world was really performance-based, because it was about patterns. So I would look at patterns and I would see the difference, the contrast. Was something in movement, it was something expanding, was it contracting, was there blockage? And just by being that simple about it, I think that curiosity would lead me to solutions. First for myself, and then just being curious about others, because everyone's different. And in sports, it gives you a vantage point because it's egalitarian, right? Like it's about everyone has a shot, and more or less, and it's metric based, so it's measured. It has a beginning, middle, and end. It has a winner and a loser, and it has stats in between. Statistics. And because it's measurable, it's something that everyone can relate to. So now I've shared my story, worked with the highest caliber athletes in the world, the highest caliber teams in the world, then started having people that would contact me from all different walks of life. And they would be in business, whether it was a CEO or a starting salesperson, or in the arts, working with film directors, working with fashion directors or fashion designers, artists, and everybody, whether they were 10 years old or they were 80 years old, could relate. And I wasn't going to be relatable, I would just share. And so that's kind of how this is all unfolded so organically, is that I say I'm obsessed, the healthy version of obsess. And obsession is love, loving what you're doing. And so that for me is this sort of, how can I help others to be at their best more often and longer? You might call that greatness. So when I was younger, my mom was clinically depressed. And so I think that's where the origin story starts, was I was trying to understand the difference. Why am I so motivated? And then, your mother, your loved ones, you want to help. So I was always trying to help. That might be directly helping her, or it might be inspiring her, just trying anything. And I think that's where the curiosity of the pattern was, differences. And I was fascinated by motivation. So I was highly motivated, like I said. And then there were, as a kid, there's other kids that you go out and you ride bikes with, and so we're jumping and we're climbing trees. And I was always into how do we do this better? How do we do this farther, higher? Trying to encourage myself, trying to encourage my brother, trying to encourage other kids on the block. And that's just who I've always been. And I've always been kind of a nerd. Even though I didn't do well in school, the complexity of knowledge, I was always curious. I was always studying stuff. If I had fish, I would have all kinds of spreadsheets and, what you feed them, what are their habits, all these different things, their Latin name. And so I wasn't getting any grades from those sort of things, but that's who I am by nature. And it fits what I do now, I'm just curious, and I collect evidence. I'm constantly looking around. And, being in this information age, as much as it's something we talk a lot about, the kind of this, the challenges of the connectivity, there are great advantages of the connectivity. So social media, we share a lot of these stories, a lot of these clips, a lot of these, just all kinds of the algorithm, let's say, and it speeds up the process. So now I have all of these clips and examples of, I said it, but hear it from the source. So that's kind of my fascination, is how do I surround someone or some group with evidence and give them tools, and then we put in place basically a loop, something we can circle back, an accountability loop. And it's super simple, but it works. And then if you show enough evidence that the great ones did the same thing, then it helps to speed up the process and lock in. Well, the podcast is natural progression of sharing the story. When I was just sharing the story in my kitchen with parents, that went to working with people. And then when I'm working with people, the word got out. They'd say, well, we go speak to groups. So I started speaking at all types of different groups. And I found myself in front of large audiences, business conventions, it could be teams. And I'd stand there going, what am I doing? How did I get here? I was at one where they were all business, and it was a big convention. And they're going through this introduction, this promotion, we have this motivational speaker, and he's done this and this, and the woman in the back, it's like they planted her to push the imposter syndrome button right before I'm going on stage. And she turns around and says, how did you become a motivational speaker? I was like, I can't even answer that question, and how am I going to go on the stage? So I've learned to just be, at this stage, just to be myself. So I took the question up on the stage and I said, it's funny, someone just asked me how I became a motivational speaker. And I was very honest. I said, I don't know if this is going to motivate you, but I'm going to tell you what my life has been like. My brother has been an important part in this. He was kind of like the first person I worked with on the sports side of things. And then I'm going to tell you the tools that I've used. I'm going to show you some before and afters. And at first you're looking out and everyone's dressed in their suits. These are suits, right? Like, how did I get here? There was a woman that was falling asleep right away. But I started unfolding all this and telling all this. And I swear everyone in the audience became children. Because what I realized what I was doing without meaning to, just being, was that I was bringing the childhood dreams back into their lives. They were starting to see the unlimited mindset, the possibility of what if I could get out of my own way? What would that look like? That woman woke up, she started asking all the questions. and I started to see, like, this is really helping people. So I grew up on motivation, with those tapes and the books that my dad had. And I always thought, like, wouldn't that be cool? That would really be cool to help people. But I didn't know how to get there. So it's the why versus the how. So I always knew my why was, I like helping people. I like sort of unpacking, performance and how do we be our best as often for as long as we can. That's always been something in being able to spread the word. So the podcast has just been a natural progression. But I think once I just started sharing these stories, and then in the stories, I do a lot of, like conversations of talking to people behind the scenes. I like to reach out. If I watch something, I'll go and see if I can get a hold of that person, or, I just love to connect with people and relate to people and tell stories. And I would tell the stories of these conversations I was having with these top level performers, like very well-known people. And I think that's the natural progression, was that people kept on saying, do you have your own podcast? Because I would speak and people would say, do you have a podcast? Do you have a book? Do you have a TED Talk? Those are the questions I was getting a lot. And I was like, no, and no. Yet. And so this has been a natural sort of, birth, that I think that now I can share these conversations in real time, and you're seeing them unfold right before your eyes. I know these people are important. I know what they've done, but I don't know exactly what we're going to talk about. And that's where the organic nature of my coaching is that I sit in the unknown, and I sit in front of someone, or I sit in front of a group, and we explore this thing and see where it goes. And it happens between us. It doesn't happen just because of me. And that's what these conversations are. They're organic. And I believe that there's something that's beyond us that happens, that gets sort of almost channeled through it, where they get lost in the moment, in the flow state, in the zone, in the moment. And I do too. And that's the magic, because I know that the people that are watching the podcast, they're drawing it out. I used to be, I've done a lot of different things in my life because I was taught to go chase your dreams, go do your thing. And so at one time I was a radio announcer back when they used to decide the music. And I noticed that the music, it was like the community was choosing the music. When I really had a set that the board would light up and everybody was really interested, this was not music that I would have chose, but I had this sense of like kind of getting out of the way. And it's almost like some people will talk about a book in a bookstore just kind of drops off or sticks, it has a stickiness to it. I would do that with the music selection. So back then it was records and CDs, and I didn't even know why I was doing what I was doing. And then people would just be I'd be blown away. And I'd be like, oh, we're all in this together. I'm out, I got myself out of the way. And so that's what these conversations are going to be, is that I know these people are really awesome. Let's see the magic that's going to happen between us in real time. So the beginning of this, I think I was always a dreamer. And then I was around, my family that were very free thinking. So my parents were kind of like out of the box. Like, all the relatives lived on the East Coast. My parents broke free and went to the West Coast on their own. And that must have taken a lot of courage just to up and leave and go start over. And then what our parents did was they were really curious too. They were really dreamers. I think I was the next generation. My parents were kind of, I might say, like, they might not have the courage to go and actually do the thing, but they would give us the information, they give us the support, and we were kind of the next generation to actually go and do the thing. And so my mom was an author. My dad was an artist, like a craftsman, so he built classical guitars, a luthier. So I came from an artist background. No one was talking about sports. Sports was not something in the household. I watched Miracle on Ice. You know, I'm old enough to have seen it on a tiny little television when I was young. Now we have the magical version that Disney made, which is based on the true story when the United States beat the Russians and the odds were way against them. And the announcer even said, "Do you believe in miracles?" in the last 3 seconds as they beat them. And it was kind of like that question. I do. I believe. So fast forward a couple of years later, and this is one of those butterfly effects, origin, you know, all these little things add up to this big, huge ripple effect. We were taking a field trip to a planetarium, which is you go in and you see the stars, right? They put these dots on the ceiling and, you know, and so it's all about outer space, astronomy. We go into the gift shop, and the gift shop has a book, and I had money in my pocket at the time. I don't know how I had money at that age. They had this book on the Olympics. It's like a picture book, and it showed all the behind the scenes of Miracle on Ice. And I was like, I have to have this. Of all things, in this science museum, they had the Olympics. And so I bought it, I took it home, and I just was obsessed with it. I kept going over the pictures. And so I kind of knew, I could feel this thing building inside of me. And we had moved to an area where it was cold. We lived in Idaho for a little bit. And I thought, maybe the Winter Olympics. So I liked Eric Heiden. Eric Heiden was, you know, equal. He still to this day holds the record for, he's a speed skater and got 5 gold medals in 1 Olympics. That's still the most that any Olympian in the Winter Olympics have ever done. He won every single distance in speed skating. So that's equivalent to someone in track winning the 100-yard dash and winning the marathon. It will never be done again, most likely. And Eric was a really cool guy. Like, he was a very nice person, relatable person. I was like, Miracle on Ice, Eric Heiden, I'm gonna be a speed skater. But I still wasn't at the age where you go out and do it, like you take control of it. Because my parents weren't talking about sports at all. This was gonna take a monumental, next leap. So then we moved back to Oregon, and that's when I saw the Olympics, the Summer Olympics. And I'm watching the Summer Olympics, and I said, okay, this is it. I'm gonna see if these books my dad has on, going out and achieving your dreams really work. This is gonna be an experiment. So I really looked at it. Now I call it a mental experiment. And I was watching the Olympics to try and decide, like, okay, I want to go there. Which sport am I going to do? I wasn't doing any sports. And there was a girl that won the gold medal in swimming. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And then they started talking. The announcer who was interviewing her afterwards said, if there's someone out there that wants to do what you just did, what would you recommend? Again, I was kind of raised to look for timing, and that seemed like that was a clear answer right there. Clear question, clear answer. So I said, whatever she says, that's what I'm going to do. She said, I went to a YMCA. So I looked up to see in my small town if we had a YMCA. We did. I went down there. In the basement, they had 2 lanes. Swimming pools usually have like 8 and more. Like, this is a tiny little pool. It's more like a bathtub. I walk up to the head coach and I said, I want to go to the Olympics. He goes, okay. And he kind of smiled at me, because you don't hear that very often. I'm 14 at the time, so I'm a freshman in high school. I'm pretty tall. And then he says to me, well, do you know how to swim? I said, no, not at all. And that's when he laughed. That's when most people laugh when I share that. But it's important to share that just because that's where I started, and I had no experience whatsoever. And he was actually a great first coach. And he said, that's fine, but you're going to have to learn how to swim, and you're going to have to learn with the kids, the younger kids. So I started out with second graders. So as I said, I was pretty tall, and they came up to my waist. And they kicked my butt all the time, every day. But for me, that seems like, for most people, that might seem like a disadvantage to start so late, because usually in the sports, they start 8 and under. And what I've learned now with what I do is it's a very unique and advantageous way to look at things, because I didn't really have a past. I wasn't carrying this weight that I see so many of these professionals carrying from the past, of old trophies, old ribbons, old achievements. I was just fully present with learning. It was this huge advantage of just, hey, out of my own curiosity, can I do that? Let's go try. So everything was about trying to get better, and getting better is collecting information, data. And whether performers know this, and this is all walks of life, this isn't just sports. If you really want to get good at something, you're constantly collecting information. You're a data junkie, so to speak. And if you truly want to be great, you want the honest truth, always. Where are you going to find honesty? Failure. Failure is going to give you the most information. And if you can flip the switch, so to speak, on failure, where you say, okay, the more I fail, the more I succeed, you've just removed one of the biggest resistance stigmas, which is failure is bad, because that's my self-worth, right? I didn't have that. And so for me, that's what sped up the process of learning and growing. And so ironically, now with my, this vantage point, I'm able to help people to say, okay, if you want to have, mental strength and all these sort of catchphrases, what's your relationship to pressure? How do you handle the big moments? And what's your relationship to failure? And so when I started out like that, my dad had shared with me this study. It was in one of his books again. He always had these books. And he would point them out, and he said, just read these few pages. I think you might like that on sports, because it wasn't his thing. And so it was on this study. It was in Australia. It was basketball. 3 months. They had 3 groups. First group, they're shooting free throws. All they did was traditional repetition of the physical world, the physical training. The next group is a control group. That's the group that didn't do anything, so that they can compare. And then the third group did mental training. That's the first time I heard that you could actually train your mind. I didn't even know that. So that was unique to me. Exciting. What? You can train your mind? I didn't know you could do that. And then at the end, they, went back and they tested them. And the first group, the traditional group, improved 24%. Okay? The control group didn't improve at all. And then the third group that was only training their mind, they didn't even touch a basketball. They had improved 23%. So I was like, whoa. So you're telling me that someone could train their mind almost as well as their body? You know, like I didn't even know that. And wait, what if I do both of those things? Then I just like, boom, that was like that big aha moment. I'm gonna train my mind as much as I train my body. Now, when you go and you talk to some of these greats and you ask them just straightforward, what's the ratio of, you know, the importance of mental versus physical? They usually say, at the lowest, they will say 60-40, usually 60% mental, 40. But they usually talk about 90, 95%, like the greats, because everyone in the final heat at the Olympics, unless you have a Usain Bolt that's like a little bit of a freak, almost everyone has a chance to at least medal, if not win the gold. It will come down to tiny little differences. And usually that tiny little difference is between your ears. And so that became my, you know, that became the rabbit hole that I went down, which is to understand what is the mind, what's the effect, how can I maximize it? And so what I did, so subconscious mind was the first area to explore, which is a good example is, if you're riding a bike somewhere that you're used to, you're riding a bike to your buddy's house, you don't even need to think about riding the bike. You don't even need to think about the traffic. If you're driving age, you get in the car when you want to go get some groceries, and you don't even think about driving the car. It's in the car, just the car itself is a very dangerous thing, if you think about it. And then also it's very chaotic because you don't know what's going to happen out there. You know the destination, the route, but you don't know the lights. You don't know if there are going to be people or other cars out there. It's very dangerous and chaotic. But you're able to do this thing without even thinking about it. And then you might get a phone call on the way. So you can multitask this thing. That's the power of your subconscious mind. And when you really start to understand how much it creates your world, how much it will really steer you into the future, that's where I wanted to do. I wanted to use this sort of superpower is what I call it, or the supercomputer. So the subconscious mind is visually based. So I created clear goals, you know, the Olympics, some other parts that would be the steps to the Olympics. And then I went and I collected some images. This is way back before like people would talk about vision boards and things like that. But for me, it was more like a Post-it note. So Post-it notes, why do we use Post-it notes? Because there's the bright color for a reason. You're able to stick them in places anywhere without leaving residue for a reason, so that you can visually remember to do something. So they're an accountability loop. So for me, it was taking a Sports Illustrated that had the Olympian that I wanted to become, cut out that picture, put it on the wall. Then I felt like, I should have a picture of myself because I need to see myself in this. So I took a picture of myself and I put it so that they were touching. And I would see that on my bedroom wall over and over and over. And I was constantly trying to make that future a reality of like, maybe it's just out of curiosity sometimes. Others, it might be a conversation. So this person, this Olympian, is named Pablo Morales. And so Pablo might, you know, on a tough day, Pablo might be encouraging me. On a great day, he might be congratulating me. It was this ongoing sort of curiosity in making the future normal. And so eventually, I did end up becoming the state champion in 4 years from not knowing how to swim. And then eventually, I mean, this is part of what I try to work with people in groups on, is that your thoughts become your words, become your actions. So if you go back to my origin story, that I walked up to the head coach and I said, I want to go to the Olympics. That's because I was clear in my mind. I didn't even care that he smiled or laughed. It didn't matter to me. because I was clear up here and I thought about it so much, I was speaking clearly. And my actions were clear because I had gone and actually done it. I was there. And so I started reaching out to all the different universities. I took a list, going back to the spreadsheet that I mentioned earlier. And I made a list of the top 20 schools, and I reached out to every single one of them. And I'm a big person that you got to be able to talk to the person if you ever want to, like in sports, you got to be able to talk to the coach if you're going to play for the coach. In life, that works. If you want to go do something, you got to be able to seize that moment. You're going to actually go out there and reach out to these people. And so that's what I did proactively, and I sent them a mission statement. This is who I am, right? I see what you've done and what you want to do probably, and I want to go to the Olympics. So it was like inward, outward, and then it was beyond in this one simple little letter. And I would send out these press packets. They had measurements. They had all of my hand size, my feet. I was like, I'm going to give them anything and everything. I'm going to give them clippings. And I got a good response from all the top 20 schools. And I ended up going to the University of Arizona. And the reason why I chose that school, because I did have a choice of a few of them, was because the head coach, Frank Bush, he reminded me of my father. The reason why I chose Frank is because I could trust him with my ideas. I didn't care about any of the coaching. That sounds crazy because most people would look at the history. No one knew who Frank was. He was a new coach. I was his first athlete. The school at the time was going through firing an old coach and kind of had a black eye, so the whole organization didn't look good. But I trusted him because I trusted my dad. And I trusted that all I needed was my mind, my ideas. Just don't mess with my head. That was my thing. And so my second year, sophomore year, I'm going against the Olympic gold medalist. And I'm beating him the whole race until the final stroke he out touches me. So if you go back, that's only 6 years of walking up to that head coach and saying, I want to be an Olympian. And now I'm going against the Olympic gold medalist and beating him almost the whole race. That's the power of the mind. I always go back to the power of mind. And I got second the next year, my junior year. And then my senior year, this is it. This is your final year. And I had another coach, so you have different coaches on the staff. So Frank was the head coach, and then I had Rick DeMont, who was my sprinting coach. That was my specialty, was the short distance. And Rick was a world record holder. He held the world record. That means that he was the fastest human being on the planet at one time. Like, really take that in. We hear world record all the time. But to actually have a world record, that means you're the fastest that's ever done this thing. He was also the first person ever in the sport of swimming to negative split, so go faster the second half than the first half. So he was an inventor, if you will. And he was my mentor. And he saw the greatness in me before I could see it, because when I got second, the first time, I'm like Jazz, like, oh, wow, this is amazing. And he would say, why are you apologizing for your greatness? I'm like, what the heck? I don't even understand what he's saying. I mean, he was nice. He wasn't, he was celebrating too, but he was trying to feed me more like a good coach. The next time afterwards, that felt like last place, getting second the second time. He got me again. And that's when he could be a little more direct, and he said, why didn't you just go take it? Whoa, what is he talking about? So the last year, my last chance, I'm standing behind the start. And I still to this day, it was just being, it's like opportunities happen in compressed time. Do you believe in miracles? The last 3 seconds of that game. Michael Jordan takes the last shot with only 3 seconds on the shot clock. Or, these big moments come down to little tiny moments. And so this was what was happening to me. I was being compressed by the moment. And all of a sudden, my aunt, she'd never seen me swim ever. She was from New York City. She was a nurse. And she went to this just to see the final race. She said to me afterwards, she said, I knew you were going to win before it even started, just by how you stood there. You were so solid. There was a presence about you that the race was already done. It was already decided. What was going on the inside is that I'm behind the start, and all of a sudden, and I don't cuss a lot. It's not really my way. It's just not me. And I said, F this race, F these people, I'm effing taking this. Now you fill in the blanks, it was the real word. And now I call it the Eff It Switch, right? But those words sound like they could be connected to being aggressive. But this was not about aggression, this was about acceptance. This was about breaking every single rule. Because performance, whether a human being knows it or not, we're kind of raised in systems so that when you go to school, you're trying to get a good grade, right? Or you're getting a bad grade and you're not being accepted. But either way, you're going through this progression through a system and you're being measured. So you're used to like looking at the outside world going, am I good or bad? Am I good or bad? Do I get to qualify for the next level, the next level, the next level? Well, if you want to break a world record, or if you want to be a champion, a national champion, whatever it might be, start a new business, it could be anything. You have to break rules. You have to break rules from the outside because most people on the outside are going to say, you're crazy? What do you mean you want to go to the Olympics? What do you mean you want to start this new business that doesn't even exist? What do you mean you want to invent the light bulb? Those are rules, and that is resistance. All great ones have to go through that. You have to be a maverick. You got to be a rule breaker. So the Eff It Switch was that. I'm tired of all these rules that I've allowed to dictate myself and who I am from the outside world. But it's even more important because it's on the inside. I had all these rules on the inside I didn't even realize. And once I allowed myself to break all the internal rules and the external rules, then I was able to really get out of my own way. That's when I believe it was like a religious experience. I mean, because I work with all these different athletes, all these different performers, all these different people from all walks of life. I share this story like I told you, and I'm always curious, like, why do they care so much? What is their great moment, their Eff It Switch moment? And a lot of these people from different walks of life, they have a faith, they have a belief, they have a trust in their ability, in that moment at least. And that's what happened, is that in order to get into the flow state, the zone, the moment, being present, the Eff It Switch, being in your body, out of your head, that's when, as they say in Star Wars, Luke Skywalker, trust the force. That's from Joseph Campbell in mythology of allow the life force to flow through you. So what I try to say now is it's not about you. It just happens through you. So I got up on the blocks and I still can't remember the race. I don't remember it. I was going so fast. So like in these races, I was swimming butterfly, and you time your turns so that you can hit it just right. And if you don't time it right, then you can almost come to a dead stop. And I was going so fast that I was missing every single turn. And there's 3 turns out of this 4 lengths. So you can imagine that that's going to slow things down a lot. because I had flipped this switch and all of a sudden I was in this race car that I'd been racing at the highest level, and now I have a turbo. I didn't even know there was a turbo. I destroyed the field, and I missed the American record by 2 inches, missing all those walls, and I don't remember any of it. That to me was the transcendence. That was created this curiosity. And you could, if faith isn't your thing, then you can go over to maybe the more scientific side. And that's the subconscious mind, that supercomputer in your muscle memory, just riding your bike, just driving your car. You just let the car drive itself, right? Or you think about the team first versus yourself. So that's where I've really found this to be explosive in a great way, is that you start to show this and share this, and then people have their own Eff It moment, and then they want to know tools on how to get closer to that so that it can happen more often and for longer periods. And I think that all of us want to understand how, as a human being, can we function to the highest level more often and longer? How can we be our best self? And that's really the unlimited, version of ourselves. So ultimately, I won the national championship. And this is straight out of like a movie, because guess who's there? I couldn't have even planned it this way. Pablo Morales, this guy that I had on the wall, programming my subconscious mind the whole time, he handed me the national championship trophy. True story, full circle, there he is. I manifested that. But I'm also going to share the flip of that, which is you can manifest stuff that you didn't even, you got to be careful you're specific, because he came into my life one more time and he delivered me something else. He came out of retirement. I remember when on the pool deck, someone gave me the headline that Pablo had come out of retirement, and I still remember the feeling in my gut, like, oh no. So I go to the next Olympic trials and I have to race against my idol. There he is in a swimsuit. And I'm going head to head with this guy. And he ended up beating me. And he took the spot on the Olympic team that I would have taken. So that is the sore that never heals. That's what feeds me. That's what this podcast is about. Is not just about winning, it's about extreme failure too, because all of us, if you're one of the greats, you've had extreme failure on a regular basis. You actually welcome it. So it's that relationship that you have to failure and pressure, and kind of like the tools that we put in place so that you can, be able to be at your best. And I think that's the exciting part about all of this, is to explore it, on a very real level. It's funny to be now described in any sort of context of wise, right? Because what I try to do with people or with groups is to protect the simple. It's kind of like, it would be like metaphoric. You see it all the time in books, right? Whether it might be the Bible or it could be children's books. Where do you want to hide something? The most powerful thing in the world. Put it inside. Put it like right in front of your face. So that's what, if there is a wisdom to it, it's just, I'm going to stay here, right here, because I know how simple it is. And I'm going to bring people into your environment that are going to create more evidence that, hey, is it really that simple? Because you are around someone, or you are someone, and they're going to, yeah, it is really that simple. It really is that simple, but you got to stick with it simple, because the mind is going to try and jump ahead. The mind is going to try and find something that's flashy, create this necessity of newness. And so that's, I like to just say, power hides in the obvious. That's the perfect place to put it. It's just so obvious. So I'll tell people straight up, I'm not going to teach you anything new. I'm not here to teach you anything new. You already know this stuff. I'm just bringing it to the top, and we're going to, as long as we're working together on this, and we're going to keep it at the top, and we're going to have accountability check in on, it is this simple, did you do the simple? Did you do the simple? Did you do the simple? And that's the power. It's not about making this into some sort of new catchphrase. It's not into some sophisticated sort of scientific discovery or new technology. Those might support this a bit here and there, but it really is going to be, you already know what works. You just have to choose where you want to go and stick with what works to get there. And if you can take off, any sort of limitation, imagine what you can do. I mean, I have all kinds of crazy stories that I can share. I mean, the part along the way was that my brother, who's 2 years younger than me, he started even later than I did. So I started when I was 14, he started when I was 17. He started for different reasons because he just saw how many friends I had. So he started following me to the pool. And then he's going to take an interest in what I'm doing. And so I was like trying to help him on the mental side of things. And he was my first person. So he's in Oregon and I'm in Arizona, going to school. And I used to send home scripts for visualization. And I'd say, okay, because you're going to trust your voice. So I want you to be, recording this and listening to this. Okay, what are your goals? Let's talk about the subconscious mind, stuff like that, like the mechanical part of the mind. Put all those things, a lot of the stuff that I do now, and of course now it's, evolved into a lot more as well. He went to the university and he too became a national champion. And we are the first brothers in the history of swimming to win the same national championship. We also did it on the world stage where we both won world championship medals, the first brothers to ever do it. And we started super late. We are completely opposite personalities, doing it for different reasons, yet we arrived at the same level of greatness. And an aside from my brother is his goal, he didn't really want to be a great athlete, is ironic. Like he just wanted to beat his brother was what my coach Rick had figured out. So when he was behind the start, Rick just said to him, hey, your brother did this, you can too. That's all my brother needed to hear. So it was sibling rivalry maybe. But his goal really was to have his own show on the Discovery Channel. And so I was like, well, the power of the mind's got to work not just in sports, it could work in entertainment. And so what we did is we went, and I taught myself, we're self-learners, like everything is just self-taught. So I taught myself how to use, a video camera, how to do some editing, all from scratch. Taught myself how to make the graphics for the Discovery Channel, and we just built it. We shot it, we built it, we put it out in the world. We did it. That's the Eff It Switch. Just go do it. Break all the rules. Don't wait for castings. Don't wait for producers. Just go do it. Put it out there. And it's a true story. 3 years later, Discovery Channel producer came to us and my brother got his own show on the Discovery Channel. It wasn't Nat Geo. It wasn't the History Channel. It was exactly what he wanted. It works. The stuff works. And I have story after story that we're going to share along the way of people winning Emmys, people having the #1 Netflix, movie in their journey story. And we're going to hear obviously about all the high level, profile people winning sports awards as well, and just get into this stuff and kind of geek out. But I think it'll be an inclusive kind of geek out where you'll be able to relate because it's really super simple. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to remind you of this. Your potential is not something that you discover once. It's something that you choose every single day. It's built in the quiet moments, in the discipline to show up when no one is watching, and the courage to grow when staying comfortable would be easier. Everything you need to rise to the next level is already inside you. Your job is to commit to it, to train it, to protect it. If today's conversation added value to your life, be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with someone who's ready to elevate. And remember, greatness isn't accidental, it's intentional. This is Seth Pepper, and this is Unlimit Your Potential. Keep growing, keep leading, keep becoming. I'll see you next time.